Got to show it off at the beginning. Benchmark is the move.
Mhm.
Big bottle, plastic
Big
bottle.
bottle, plastic bottle.
I can feel it squishing in my hands. This is really exciting. But I mean, there's a lot of it. So I assume you consume a lot of it on any given night. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this Benchmark is a lower price point bourbon. Kind of a rite of passage for you fellas that are getting into this.
Cheers, Arm.
Cheers. So yeah, this would, a lot of times be mixed with some things or kind of enjoyed, on its own. The old high school wives' tale. I guess I should say college for all you listeners, but the
Junior year of college, 21 plus.
Yeah, junior year. Yeah. For me, that would have been senior year too. I was very young.
Got you.
Anyway, I believe that the lower price point alcohol keeps you drunk less amount of time.
Got it.
So those would be consumed over a full day. Not a full one of those, but those would typically be split.
Got you. This is very sweet, Walker Bueller.
Yeah.
Yes.
By the way, this is Walker Bueller who we're talking to. I don't think
I
said your name when we started this. So
That'd be me.
Sorry about that. All right, we're gonna jump in. We're gonna talk Dodgers stretch of wins. I know Aram's got a question about another LA guy that just made his big league debut this weekend, and it came very, very quickly. J-Rod too, and then we'll wrap with Shane McClanahan. But starting with the Dodgers, man, I mean, they lose a ball game and then they don't. They're winning 2 in a row and they go into the double off day. It was 11 in a row before the loss, and then now it's 13 to 14. These guys are, dude, like we're looking at the numbers. We talked about it end of last week. Lynn's been standing on his head. Rosario been standing on his head. Kelly has been awesome. Everybody is all systems go. Yarbrough, another guy too. Is that, and you've been around this team more over the last couple of weeks, how infectious is what's going on right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, you can look at kind of the big picture of our team. And I saw some stat in the last like 4 or 5 Augusts. The record in August for us has been ridiculous. And, I think you can credit a lot of that to the front office this year, especially, but you talk trade deadline, getting to August, and then we start playing well, right? Like the front office has to have a feel for the clubhouse and the team and the needs, and seemingly most of the guys that we trade for end up kind of spiking in performance, whether that be from how we scout or how we play or the energy of the clubhouse or getting out of a bad situation or whatever it may be. Most guys that get traded to us end up performing pretty well. And, that's not always the case, right? There's some, notorious trades for guys that have gone really well and then they sometimes don't go so well. And seemingly for us the past few years, they've gone really well. So I think you kind of add all that in with the talent and, some of these younger guys are now not really rookies anymore. They're big leaguers and kind of figuring it out that way. And pretty cool little run.
Arm, real quick. I've heard that saying in college football about freshmen. Like at the point, I think week 8 or week 9, these guys aren't freshmen anymore.
Yeah.
And you can see that. So now do you feel like a James Outman has fully established himself? He's comfortable with who he is as a ball player, and it's really all systems go through the end of this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. You look at the way that even Major League Baseball qualifies a rookie, right? And all of these guys have exceeded those limits, right? They're not rookies next year. And so if you want to approach them that way this year, I think that's very fair, right? If the season started tomorrow, they wouldn't be in the hunt for rookie of the year, right? And so, I think a lot of that kind of rookie status comes with getting used to the lights and the size of the stadium and the fact that you recognize every guy on the other team. And, you do that 6, 8, 10 times. Some guys still get nervous and all of that stuff, even guys that have played for 10, 12, 15 years, right? But that initial kind of this thing is bigger than me, or the assumption that you don't belong there, I think has long faded for those guys.
So that idea that a lot of players have come over in recent memory, especially this year specifically, and I'm sure you've probably seen some of like the viral like posts about like this player was at X number of OPS or ERA, and then they're at Y after they go to the Dodgers. You mentioned a lot of the different situations in which a guy can, kind of kick it into another gear. And of course it's nuanced and there's specific situations, but is there one thing maybe that stands out more than others as to why the Dodgers specifically seem to have this happen more? Like if you could try to boil it down to like one most frequent reason why, what would it be?
I mean, I think information is huge, right? And we talk about all the analytics and all of this stuff now. And, I think our front office obviously does a good job with it, but I think there's a couple of different avenues that you can really study that, right? In terms of players that have kind of been pushed out by other organizations that we get, and then they're all stars, right? That's one kind of fold of it. And then the trade deadline is a second, right? You kind of, I guess the money ball technique of old school analytics, which is kind of a weird thing to say, old school analytics, but was like trying to accentuate strengths that other people didn't really understand, right? They use Euclid and Hatterberg as kind of the evidence of that in Moneyball, right? But for us, that's Muncy and Chris Taylor, guys that weren't the same players, get to us, retool, redevelop, and become all-star level players, right? So to me, that's very evident both in the minor league guys that we have signed, and then now the trade deadline. I think it's all kind of under one hood.
Are you a baseball movie guy, or are you like, if I'm watching a movie, it's not baseball related?
No, I would say I'm not a huge baseball movie guy. There's a few that I really like, but I haven't seen all it would be almost embarrassing to go through like the classics and tell you the ones I haven't seen. But yeah, Major League is probably my favorite. Those two are probably my favorite ones.
You're a Benchwarmers guy too, right?
I watch Benchwarmers. I was at the right age for that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm not a big sports movie guy. I just knocked out Remember the Titans for the first time last week.
Yeah, that doesn't do it for me a lot. I like The Replacements. The Replacements is probably one of my favorite sports movies of all time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm not the biggest sports guy.
Gotcha. Eric Kratz is with our friends at Foul Territory, who are also brought to you by BetMGM. And I thought he said something really fascinating last week. They were talking about the Dodger, development system and how perennially that is one of the best farm systems in all of baseball. And the sentence that really jumped out to, I think, a lot of people was they treat their minor leaguers like major leaguers, or more so than other organizations. What does that look like? Is that chef for each affiliate? Is that, sleeper bus instead of coach bus? What does that exactly look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably even improved since I was in the minor leagues, but we were kind of the first team that I remember, the first that I had ever heard of all organic food in the minor leagues, which was a big thing. Gabe Kapler was our farm director, and obviously if you look at him, you understand that he eats pretty organic, I imagine. But that was the big push at that time, and then getting the right people and having the right infrastructure, all of that stuff is important. And yeah, I would have to imagine, I know we treat our guys well. I imagine the size of the market helps too, right? Do we rent 2 buses for the AAA team, or do we fly them, right? And those kind of things can have big, paid big dividends, I think, over the course of a season. And I think we've also talked about like Ohtani and the Angels making a kind of a statement and not trading, right? Like the same thing. You're making a statement that you care about all the guys in the organization. And I've got to imagine on the minor league side, if you're going to make maybe $2,000 a month less with us, say it's 20,000 or 18,000, some guys will probably choose to take a little bit less to be treated a different way, right? And so you're paying dividends that way in terms of being able to get some guys back and keep developing them. And you see a lot of guys that get traded back or get brought back into the fold in LA, right? And I'm so glad to be back here, right? And so I think just kind of evidence that stuff matters, right?
You're a smart guy that likes to get into like the weeds of the analytics and the numbers, and we've broke that down. But maybe not every single player one, maybe has that background, or two,
Right.
has that thirst for knowledge that way. But a lot of the reason why is usually they just don't understand it. How much of it is just explaining kind of what some of these numbers mean? Because they also mentioned everybody gets the iPad and everybody has that, back end server where you can kind of get all the numbers on yourself, your opponents, whatever it may be. And some guys don't use that. I'm sure a lot more do now. One, was that something that was there for you? Obviously, it wouldn't be to the degree it is now, but was that something that was there for you? And then how much of it is kind of explaining some of these advanced metrics in layman's terms so that players can leverage that to give themselves an advantage?
Yeah, I think for me, I to be honest with you, I didn't know any of my spin rates or verts or anything like that until the big leagues, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I kind of had an interesting education that way in terms of, trusting the people around me, telling me that this is good, this isn't as good, this is what we need to work on, and just doing that, and then them seeing the improvement on their end, right? But now the younger player, the minor league player now can go get a TrackMan and probably is throwing on TrackMan all winter, right? So it's just a little bit different. I think the familiarity with it is huge, but I think it is a different time now in the lower, in the minor leagues than it certainly was when I was there, just in terms of the kind of ready use of it. It was kind of, when I was going through the minor, it was more of like a year to year, like, hey, this pitch was really good because of this. And then you're like, okay, cool. I'll keep doing that. Right. But I think also, especially the higher level minor leagues you get to, it's more about performance-based analytics as opposed to like your spin and all this stuff. Like a big one I remember for 2 weeks in AAA as a reliever, I threw nothing but 0-0 slider. Why? Because during the season, people were like 3 for 40 if I threw ball or strike slider. As long as I threw it 0-0, and that we saw that as an advantage, right? It didn't matter what the slider was doing. It was just simply, it was setting up at bats in a good way for me. And I think that's some of the stuff that might be a little bit lost these days.
Yeah. We're asking a pitcher to talk about hitting development, but I want to pivot to Nolan Schanuel, who just debuted with the LA Angels after 95 minor league plate appearances. I think about 20 came at the complex. And this was an Aram topic here. He was like, I got to ask Walker Buehler about this. So Aram, is the question, what are your thoughts? Or
yeah,
is
just thoughts, question mark? No, which is my least favorite thing that we get on Twitter, by the way, for episodes.
How do you feel about, yeah.
No, like, there's this obvious push of, pitching prospects through the minor leagues and we've talked about that. And I actually want to get a little bit into that as well. Because you don't want to waste bullets. And, I feel like you can work with guys at challenging levels, and the stuff is so good nowadays. It makes sense. Hitting is a little different, as I know, and like, this is something that is just kind of changing with certain teams not as much. But I thought this was like by far one of the most outrageous things I've seen done in terms of like a promotion. And that's me saying it. So like, it's okay. I just want your thoughts on this, because it's not just that he went from, college pretty much straight to the bigs. It's that he went from Conference USA to leadoff for the LA Angels. And I guess my question is, if he performs well, do you think that this changes the thought of any teams or anything like that? Because I did see some people out there trying to say, this is a good thing, this makes sense. I don't know if it does. I think it's a little crazy. But again, like, I don't think you're complaining as a player to get your clock started and get an opportunity to bat ahead of Shohei Ohtani. But I just kind of wanted your thoughts on just the whole situation, and if you think that being that aggressive could ever have any negative impacts on any player, not specifically to Schanuel, of course, but like just in general, this quick of a push.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, it's all the old school thoughts on all of this stuff, like, is he ready, whatever. But at the end of the day, like, the Angels were seemingly trying to win, and then came out of the break bad, and in some way they're just giving that guy like an accelerated development, right? So he's going to be able to walk into spring training next year knowing what went good, what went bad, and if they're really excited about that player, like, I get it. I just saw Cruz moved up, skipped high A. Like, there are talents like that, and guys that seemingly need want to and can be pushed. I started a year in high A and ended up in the big leagues in September, so I've kind of lived that that life, right? I guess, or that experience, but yeah, not quite like this guy, but you know what? He came up, he got a hit. I know was part of that triple play, was aware, didn't seem like too big of a thing for him. And if anything though, he'll still be a rookie next year. So he's just gonna have kind of a 2-month leg up in terms of knowing what this thing is all about, right? And Anaheim has always kind of brought guys up quick. I know they have some reliever arms that they brought up really quick. That's obviously the more typical route is the pitcher that gets called up early. But it is what it is. I can't judge another team doing it. I think it's really quick, but at the end of the day, like if you get that guy 60 at bats and he walks in a better player next year and makes your opening day roster and that helps your team, power to you.
On the flip side, sorry, Jack, one quick thing is I just watched Paul Skeens throw today, and he threw 2 innings in low A, and I assume he's going to wherever he goes next. Either it'll be really quick or it'll be, kind of that double jump like we saw from Dylan Cruz. Skeens was like clearly working on something, which was the craziest part. Like he threw, I think, 4 changeups in a row on 2 different occasions, which is, that was a pitch he barely threw at LSU. On the pitching side, how much do you think we could, like, how likely do you think it is that we'll start to see those kind of guys, especially the college arms, fast tracked? And like you just made an example of yourself of being a guy that was fast tracked, but like that was somewhat rare. And now I feel like it might almost become more of the norm because of arm injuries and just the volatility of the position. Where do you think the future of pitching prospects is? Because Jack and I have talked about this a lot. Of just, is the pitching prospect almost becoming less of a thing? And it's more like, if you believe in this arm, like get them up there real quick.
Yeah. I mean, I think not to keep talking about analytics, and I feel like we do it every week, but you can really kind of, apples to apples compare a fastball now where it used to be the eye test and velo, right? So you're getting probably a more accurate representation or understanding of what certain guys can really do. And, you strike a guy out in low A, you strike a guy out in low A, right? But if you do it at 24 vert or whatever, some crazy throw, like the assumption is that will work in double A as well. And triple A, as opposed to kind of back in the day, it was like, all right, he's doing good in low A. All right, is he going to do better at the next one and the next one? And I think now you can kind of, I guess it's kind of a horse racing thought, right? Is like a horse wins by 50 lengths against 5 horrible horses. That doesn't mean that horse is good, right? But if he wins by 50 lengths and the time is unbelievable, that horse can run, right? It's the same thing where you're in some way in the minor leagues, guys are really competing against themselves and then the guys in the big leagues. And I think you're seeing this little bit less segmentation of organizations. And I think part of that is that there's not as many minor leaguers anymore, right? Yeah. So the teams are less, the steps the ladder is shorter, and it makes a lot more sense. And the difference between high A and double A is probably not as much as it might have used to be.
Your game log looks a little funny in 2018, and my mind was going to the idea that if Schanuel really fails at this level, and I don't know what failure looks like. It could look sub 200. It could look, OPS in the 500s, whatever it may look like. And I'm rooting for him to succeed. We all are rooting for him to succeed. But if it does go poorly, if he is overmatched by Major League Baseball, just getting into and I don't even think it's an ego thing, but getting into the confidence level of Major League Baseball players, guys that get there. I'm around guys that are optioned all the time in Indianapolis, and there are guys that handle it in a bunch of different ways. I'm trying to figure out, so you got optioned out of spring training in 2018, and then you had a weird pop-up start in Rancho in early July in 18. What happened there? That was
a rehab start.
That was a rehab. Okay. But you got optioned. You had a decent bit of time. You were a September call-up in 17. How did that feel for you? To get that taste and then go back to the minor leagues?
I guess for me, the part that made it easier was I could say, well, I was a reliever and I'm being optioned because I'm not one of the 5 starters. Right. And also if you look at that team, we had some real veteran starting pitching, right? Rich Hill and Rue and Kirsch and strip, and there were guys that they weren't just gonna get rid of them for me, right? But some guys get hurt, and I think I made 3 starts in AAA, and then came up. So, I don't want to get too in the weeds on the CBA and service time and all of that stuff, but all of that stuff's a factor, and I'm probably a little more understanding than most players of that stuff, just because I've done the union. I've kind of always been a devil's advocate kind of thinker, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like, all right, well, if I was the front office of this team and I was managing my career, how would I do that? And kind of seemingly what they did is what I probably would have done as well. No matter how odd I think the system is with that.
Yeah. That's the hard, that's the hard double-edged sword of it, because it's like, yeah, I'm good. I'd want another year of me too, right? Like that's kind of the thought of it. But on the flip side, it's the weird business nature of it. That was the interesting thought too, because I guess for you could look at it from that lens where it's like, it's not as much to do with my performance from multiple angles.
No.
But just kind of to wrap a bow on the conversation, again, like if Schanuel struggles, like, okay, it would, almost every human being in that position would probably struggle. So you can probably compartmentalize that and say, hey, I was put in kind of a sink or swim situation, and how, I actually swam a little bit. Obviously we don't know the kid. You don't know the kid, can't really speak to his thought process, but do you feel like that is enough to kind of say, hey, this probably isn't going to stifle somebody's confidence, like getting an opportunity that early, even if you struggle? Do you almost feel like that's more of a vote of confidence than like, oh, I struggled, I don't belong? It's more like, not only did they think I belong, they thought I could belong there way before anybody else would normally even get a shot.
Yeah, I mean, I think some organizations are very oriented under sink or swim, or push a guy until he fails, right? Other organizations want to push guy, even when they push them, they want to push them so that they will fail and get better, right? There's organizations that want you to fail in the big leagues, and there's orgs that can't afford that, right? I think you watch kind of how we've handled rookies and brought guys up that you could make the argument we're ready before they got called up, but when they did get called up, they were very, very successful. And
I mean, dude, good example of that. Sorry to cut you off. A good example of that is Ryan Noda, who went over to Oakland and mashed, and he was in the Dodgers system forever.
Right. Yeah, we had him for a while. I think even Corey was a very fast high school pick, but was probably ready, was fine. Julio, we threw every level you could at him, and at all these crazy ages, and he didn't fail. And then it's like, all right, let's go. His only real failure ever came pretty early in the big leagues, and then he went down, figured it out, and been himself kind of since then, right? So I think that's going back to kind of how they treat minor league guys. That's getting to know the people in your organization, and knowing them as people, and knowing what makes them tick, and how they handle failure. All that kind of stuff kind of wraps into these little really individual kind of outlier situations that we can sit and pick apart all day. But if they knew that kid better than you would think they do in a couple months, and loved everything about him, and said, hey, we need a first baseman, we think this kid's better than whoever we got in AAA, whatever.
Let's jump to Julio Rodriguez. 17 hits in a 4-game stretch. That has never been done before, ever. Yeah, it's really hot. We were talking about this guy in the intro, and I mean, he did not play center field before spring training in 2022, and now he's one of the better center fielders in all of baseball. We've talked about the freaks before. We've talked about Ellie. We've talked about you coming up with O'Neill Cruz when he was a Dodger farmhand. But have you ever been around somebody that has stood on their head quite like this over a stretch? What the hell is going on with you?
Not kind of this short term, like a week, right? I mean, obviously guys have had good weeks, but Cody in 2019 for the first half was probably the most prolonged, scary, good thing I've seen. Corey Seager in the playoffs in 2020 was probably the hottest I've seen someone that involves the clutch part, and the stakes are that high, and that it was pretty impressive. And he got a couple MVP trophies to prove it. But I don't think I've really ever seen anyone quite just go, and every time he swung, you knew something good was going to happen. Quite like that stretch.
How about, I mean, in a way, it's not quite the same way, but I'm looking at like Freddie Freeman's last 30 games. He's hitting 380.
Yeah.
We talked about him a couple episodes ago, and I'd been wanting to pick your brain just from like the behind the scenes professional perspective here, because this is a guy that's going to turn 34 years old in a month, and it already had an incredible career and somehow is getting better. How does somebody like Freddie Freeman get better at in his age 33 season like this? I mean, this is on pace to be maybe his best campaign ever.
Yeah. I think a big part of it, right? Somebody asked me, this is kind of a full circle thing. Somebody asked me what I thought about Arias and if he had a chance to hit 400 before the season. And I said, listen, man, he's probably got the best chance of anyone we've seen in a long time, but he's in a new division, right? And he hasn't seen those arms. And so he doesn't have the familiarity. I don't think it would happen this year. He almost really proved me wrong, right? But I think for Freddie, a guy who really trusts his eyes, knows what he sees, has played a long time. Like, this is the second year that he's in this division, and kind of has some familiarity with these guys and knows how they're going to try and get him out. I think also Freddie obviously hits the ball the other way a lot, but he also is a big left-handed hitter that has power. Like, the shift changing probably has benefited him in some way. Corey Seager's another guy that it's benefited for sure. I mean, he's always been like the 280, 290 guy with power, and this year both the power and the average are up, right?
Oh yeah.
I think you start seeing these guys that you look back and you're like, man, that's like a really, really good swing. And I think they're getting rewarded now. Guys that hit the ball everywhere are really getting rewarded. And I think to some extent, the guys that roll over a lot of balls that into the shift, who you thought this might really help, it hasn't helped quite as much. I see the shift change as less about not having guys over here and more having a spread, right? It seemingly is a lot more green when people are spread out, right? And so you just see these guys that stay inside the baseball, hit homers to the pull side when things are hung, like the kind of traditional baseball swing, are having really, really good years.
Something about your guy Corey. Arm, I don't know if you saw this exact number, but I saw he's on pace for the highest WRC plus by a shortstop of like the modern era or something like that. I mean, this guy's putting together the best offensive season by a shortstop ever.
That was, I mean, I don't know if that was there. I had a tweet about that. I think I just pulled it up. I queued it up just from 2000, the year 2000, the highest WRC plus seasons with minimum 350 plate appearances. It's Corey Seager at 189, Troy Tulowitzki at 170. He got hurt that year. I don't know if that was the year where he took the bat to the wall and messed his arm up or not, but he cut his season short that year. And then it's A-Rod, Tatis. But Seager by so much. It's 189 to 170 to 159. It's unbelievable. I've been wanting to write like a dive into him.
He's doing this with a thumb injury too. Like, he got hurt against us, which kind of is even wilder to me.
Yeah. So I wanted to write a piece on this, Walker. Like, I wanted to just kind of dive into it. And I like, other than this could be the best shortstop season we've seen in however long, like, there's so many different things I guess you could dive into it, but I kind of want to like kick it to you. What's the story with Corey Seager this season? Like, what is it to you? Like, if you could describe what he's doing this year with this
I mean,
team.
I wish I could see it in front of me, right? I watch our games and that's kind of it. I guess my only opinion is really based on like kind of having played with him. It's just, he's got a really, really good baseball swing. He hits a lot of balls hard. He mishits a lot of balls hard in the right places, right? So the one that he doesn't hit for a double, but he like is close, he still hits it hard and hits it in good spots. I think Freddie does that really well too, where seemingly every ball that he hits but doesn't smoke is in the right kind of lanes, right? I guess you kind of liken it to golf where, all right, I can aim here, I'm going to try and draw it. Oh, it didn't draw, but it still lands on the green, right? Like, they just have a good spray pattern on their misses. And then they both obviously have, power when they clip balls. And, I think that's kind of, the key to successful hitting, as much as I don't know about that. But yeah,
We've seen your nuke, dude. We've already played your home run on social media and all that. So yes, you're a beast. We get it. Want to wrap with Shane McClanahan because and it sucks that we're wrapping with this, but such is the nature of the beast. This guy was arguably the best pitcher in the American League, maybe the best pitcher in all of baseball pre-All-Star break. And I mean, he's due for his second TJ 7 years after his first. He got his first when he was a freshman in South Florida, and he's getting his second here. And we were talking about it end of last week. DeGrom this year just got his second TJ. Eovaldi's a 2 TJ guy, which you've talked about. You're a 2 TJ guy. And for somebody that is in, thankfully I guess you're approaching the final stages of your rehab process from your second. But if you could, talk to Shane, give him any sort of advice on going through this again, because we've talked about the frustration that you experienced there. If you can offer any sort of, advice or encouragement to Shane McClanahan, what would that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know that I'm in a position to do that. I think it's just indicative of kind of where we're at in baseball, right? McClanahan's been a Cy Young guy. He wouldn't trade the success he's had the past 2 or 3 years to not deal with this, right? And I think the biggest thing for me has been kind of accepting that I chose to try and throw a ball 100 miles an hour every time I throw it, right? And there is inherent risk in that you are going to get hurt, right? We've yet to see someone that has thrown 100 his whole career and never gotten hurt. It's just really, really difficult to do. So it's kind of part of the deal, right? I guess the big thing for him is that he's not at University of South Florida in a dorm room rehabbing. He's a professional baseball player with a professional baseball player's salary, and gets to go and live in a house and make himself comfortable and find a way to make the next 12 or 14 months as kind of beneficial and impactful for him, for his arm, as he can, right? And learning kind of certain things that help you recover and all of this that you probably didn't have the financial access to in 2016 or 15 or whenever that you do now. And embracing that, I think, is kind of the only thing you can do, and realize that you wouldn't trade whatever success you've had to not have had this surgery, right? It is what it is. It sucks. You feel like shit because you are getting paid more than you've ever gotten paid because you're in the ARB deal, right? And you've been having great seasons, and you had dreams of making $1 billion and all of this stuff, and it kind of goes on pause, right? But I don't think that means the disc comes out, right? It's just paused, and you give yourself 14 months to work and to be smart and to do a podcast and get back.
Yeah. And this is something that it's interesting because it's a way more extreme example, but when you mentioned it comes with the territory of being nasty, really, and being physically gifted and being able to push your body to the limits that a human body is being able to push to, I think of the NFL, and that's a more extreme example, and or even UFC, but that's a little different because those guys let their bodies go and
they sign up for it.
Yeah. But the NFL, these guys kind of they know what they're signing up for, and they know that it might be a short shelf life, but they're willing to go all out to maximize that shelf life. And I think that there's the pitchers are the closest thing to that from a physical shelf life. This wasn't on the rundown, and we can just use this maybe as a tease for the next episode, because I don't know if I want to totally open this can of worms if it's going to end up being something way deeper. But I'm seeing conversation about the pitch clock and people's belief on how that can have an impact. I see Jack shaking his head. We don't need to get into that. We don't even need to talk about it. But I just I'd be remiss to not mention that it's being discussed. I don't have a position on it because I'm not a professional pitcher. I think it's a little bit of confirmation bias because guys have been getting hurt all the time forever. And we've been talking about the Tommy John epidemic and arm issues forever. So I think it's kind of silly to blame the pitch clock, but scientifically more pitches in a short period of time, if you're not in shape, could have a negative effect. Do we even want to open that can of worms, or should I shut up?
I think what I would want to see is on the specific guys that are getting hurt, right? how fast were they normally without the pitch clock? Because a limitation is not necessarily a limitation unless your average time is more than what you're being limited to, right? So, like, if I was 13 seconds per, and now I'm only allowed to have 15, but I averaged 13 my whole career.
Yeah.
I don't think the pitch clock is the problem.
Yeah.
Right.
If it was like Kenley Jansen going down, like, then you're like, all right, like, I could see it, I'll hear that one out. That's a good point.
But then the argument also is that
he's 30, whatever.
Well, no, also, like, he's a big fella. Like, Kenley works a lot harder than people would give him credit for. He runs and does all this stuff. But if you got guys that don't take care of themselves, like, and like, Kenley wasn't out there huffing and puffing trying to get back on the mound, right?
No.
We've seen those guys that are not in great shape. And so if that guy gets hurt because of the pitch clock, like, kind of is what it is, right? If you go and try and run a marathon without prepping for it, you're probably going to pull your hamstring, right? And I don't think that the timing stuff was really a surprise to us, right? We kind of knew that it was coming, and if you're concerned, do a couple more sprints and hopefully go well. But, like,
I love that point.
Have some acai.
I love that point.
I just think the amount of money that guys make playing a game for a living, kind of, I'm very unsympathetic even to myself about the challenges of that, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I love that.
Figure it out, bro.
Yeah.
Do whatever you gotta do. But if you get hurt and you're costing your team $28 million because you're hurt, because you weren't in good enough shape to handle a pitch clock, like, I don't think it's the pitch clock's fault, right?
Yeah. It's not like they're asking you to do like rapid fire pitches, just like every 2 seconds. Like,
right. And then you think about back, like, some of the stuff we used to do in college, like, our coach was big on controlling your heart rate, right? Which is a big part of pitching and pressure and dealing with it. We would throw like 5 pitches in the bullpen, sprint to dead center field and back, throw 5 more pitches, because you had to learn how to, like, all right, my heart's going crazy. How do I calm this down? How do I slow down? It's probably not great for your arm, but like 92-mile-an-hour fastball where I'm under control, likely better than 94 when I'm not. Like, it's not all just about the arm and all of it. It takes your brain and your body and your heart and whatever to kind of be able to throw a ball to an area like this. And
I do. So I think, Jack, I want your thoughts on this, because it's funny, like, just being in the media space, like, it's become like such a, like, conversation of, does the pitch clock affect injuries or does it not? Not the nuance that Walker just hit on here, which is there a preventable aspect, even if the pitch clock is affecting players, that it's just like, get in better shape? I don't think anybody's really presented that point, right? I haven't really seen that of, like, you had ample notice. You had the, it's like when you get your math packet over summer, like, if you're like, man, this math was harder than I thought it would be, like, you didn't look at it until August, like, that's on you. Like, that's kind of, I never really thought about that lens. It was just always more like a science argument of, is the pitch clock negatively affecting or not? Well, are you allowing it to?
I think that was a lot of guys' argument with the sticky stuff, right? When they do that in the middle of the season, all of us were extremely concerned about our health.
Yeah.
Like, we had no time to prepare for that. They gave us like a 3-week buffer or something. But, like, listen, man, like, if you're using something and now you're not, the grip pressure on every single one of your throws has to be different. Your wrist is now has to change the way that it moves, because if you want to throw the same pitches, like, for me, I think it's an injury issue, because you have to hold the ball tighter, right?
Yeah.
And so we talk about forearms,
and
guys' forearms are going, like,
feel that.
Like, we're throwing harder than we ever have, meaning that all of us are moving faster and having to hold the ball harder than we ever have. And then you take stuff away that people have used for the past 50 years, and you wonder why forearm issues are up. Like, to me, that's more the issue, right? Do I have knowledge of that stuff? Do I know what that feels like? Maybe, possibly, allegedly. but like it is an issue, and to do it in the middle of the season is a problem. So as stern as I can be against people worrying about the pitch clock because we had, ample time, means that I can be that stern against the way that was handled. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And the only other guy that I've heard kind of express that thought with the adhesive is Glasnow. When Glasnow got hurt, Tyler Glasnow, I mean, snapped. Like, I was like, that was a bar, dude. But he was saying what Kyle Snyder, the pitching coach of the Rays, was like, you got to hold it like an egg. And then he used the term like, you got to choke the shit out of it. So, no, I think that's spot on. Also, I kind of love that exercise at Fandy. That feels like elevated, like Orange Theory fitness type stuff. Like
we would do that. We would have your whole team yelling at you while you threw bullpens, like everyone on the pitching staff.
No,
it's very basketball adjacent. It's very basketball adjacent.
Secrets that your college teammates know that other people don't.
Right.
Screaming them at you, and yeah.
Now, did you do that outside? Because I know Hawkins is right on campus.
No, we did that one in the lab.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Good call.
I'll wrap with one quick trivia question on yourself. What do you think the hardest hit ball is of your career? Minor leagues or major leagues? Hardest exit velocity off of your bat?
104.
There's a couple 104s.
Yeah, homer in St. Louis was 104.
There's one ball you hit harder than that by a decimal.
Double in Miami.
Same year. Single
to right field, probably.
To left field.
Hold one.
I don't know that I ever thought I pulled a ball ever in my career. Who was it off of?
You got a 104.8 off Merrill Kelly. Single into left field. I'm sending you the video later. I'll send you the video.
I didn't know that.
3-2 count, 2 on.
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's the hardest ball you've ever hit.
Yeah, I have no recollection of that, to be honest with you.
I blacked out. It was crazy. All right, Walker, you're awesome. Appreciate you, and we'll we can get into more stuff next week. Cool.
Perfect. Sounds good, buddy.